Spring training is here, and there's a lot of speculation about what the Red Sox 2026 season is going to look like. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston and Balling, your home for all things Boston sports. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, currently the host of this show, as well as the Locked On Red Sox podcast, which is a Monday through Friday Boston Red Sox podcast available on any podcast platform. So if you want to hear more in-depth Red Sox talk, definitely subscribe to that, as well as subscribe to Boston Balling on any podcast platform, because I will be talking all things Boston sports, whether it's Patriots, Celtics, Bruins, Red Sox, you name it, bringing some fun guests on along the way. So make sure that you are tuning into that as well. And it's an exciting time for sure. I mean, the Celtics looking to make a playoff push with Jason Tatum hopefully coming back. Bruins coming back from the Olympic break next week, and it feels like it's been forever since they've played, but it's been a long break, so it'd be interesting to see how they come back together after this break. Red Sox down at spring training now. I will be down there next weekend, which is very exciting, so if any of you are going to be at spring training, make sure that you say hi to me while you're there. Hopefully the weather is warm is what I'm really looking forward to. But going into spring training, there's been a lot of mixed feelings about the offseason that the Red Sox had. And to me, I'm feeling good about where the Red Sox are at. Could they have done a little bit more? Yes. And where they should have done a little bit more is particularly on the offensive side of the ball. This lineup lacks a little bit of power and pop, and they missed out on a lot of the power-heavy hitters that they could have gotten. Pete Alonso was a big example, who signed with the division rival Orioles. That was a player that it was reported after the fact that the Red Sox didn't really give a huge offer to. And from what I know internally, the Red Sox weren't keen on him and didn't really want to commit to a longer term deal with him because of the fact that he's already in his 30s, and they just didn't see it being worth it because he is not the best defender at first base. And I think that's something that we do need to keep in mind here is, yes, he's going to make the Orioles offense a lot better, but from a defensive standpoint, he would have been a bit of a liability. And for the Red Sox, they were prioritizing infield stability on defense, because one of the big moves they made this offseason was acquiring Ranger Suárez, a starting pitcher who is adding to the plethora of pitchers that the Red Sox have that are very ground ball heavy pitchers, generating weak contact. So we can expect a lot of weak ground balls to the infield. So because of that, the Red Sox needed to make sure that their infield defense was up to par. So that's why bringing in a guy like Pete Alonso, I think there were some concerns there about his ability to play a sound first base. So it kind of turned the Red Sox off from wanting to give him more than a couple of years. So he ended up taking that deal with the Orioles. Okay, if they don't like the defense, it is what it is. But the problem then became, okay, we're going to try to pursue Ketel Marte, and we're going to try to pursue Alex Bregman. And then they couldn't work out a deal with Marte because they were unwilling to give up the package of Marcelo Meyer and one of Connolly Early or Peyton Tolley. That was what the Diamondbacks eventually proposed after a lot of talk and a lot of negotiation. That was the package that they kind of settled on, that they wanted from the Red Sox, and the Red Sox were unwilling to do that. And part of the reason why they didn't want to budge, especially on the Marcelo Meyer front, is because they had missed out on Alex Bregman. And because Alex Bregman went and signed a 5-year deal with the Cubs, it put the Red Sox in a bit of panic mode, because when they went into this offseason, I think they were banking on Alex Bregman coming back. I don't think it was even really a thought much to them, and by them, I mean the front office, that it would end up being a scenario where they would miss out on Bregman. I just don't think that was something that crossed their minds, because they assumed that the offer they gave him was good enough. But ultimately what it come down to is the fact that they didn't offer as much money as the Cubs did, and what they did offer was something that did not include a no trade clause. So essentially he wanted a guaranteed no trade clause in the contract, because he said, look, I have 2 young kids. I'm not trying to move around a lot more. Like, I want to go somewhere where I can comfortably settle down and play baseball so that I don't have to keep moving my family, which is a very reasonable ask. If you're trying to do what's best for your family and also your career, you want to go somewhere where you can kind of make it your home. And so he went to Chicago because they were willing to give him a full no trade clause over the course of the 5-year contract. The Red Sox didn't want to do that. And that makes a lot of sense because given that the deal the Red Sox gave him last offseason was very team friendly with a 3-year deal with opt-outs after each season, they probably wanted something similar of, yeah, we can give you a 5-year deal, but we don't want to commit to a no trade clause in case partway through we don't feel like you're giving us the value we want anymore. So because they refused to budge on that, that's why he went with the Cubs deal. And the Red Sox, I don't think at the time expected him to go elsewhere, and they were confident, and they expressed they were confident in the offer that they made. So the problem then became, all right, well, we kind of operated this offseason on the assumption that we would have Bregman coming back, and he hasn't. So what do we do now? Like he decided to go elsewhere. So now how do we approach this offseason? So because they lost Bregman and they didn't really have another third base option, that's when it became more necessary to them when they felt like, okay, we kind of do need to keep Marcelo Meyer here, because in order for us to be able to build the team that we want to build, we need to have a sound presence at third base. And this was before they traded for Caleb Durbin, who they are playing around with the idea of playing him at third. They said, okay, we can't really trade Meyer at this point because he's a guy who we see being part of the future, and it becomes more of a necessity now to complete our infield now that we missed out on Bregman. Now, going back to the Ketel Marte thing, this is notable as well because they were also really adamant on keeping Connolly Early and Peyton Tolley here. For a lot of the offseason, they didn't want to move one of them, and that was holding up a potential trade with the Diamondbacks for the Red Sox to bring in Marte. And Ketel Marte, no doubt, is the best second baseman in baseball. He's also in his 30s, so the Red Sox could have had some hesitation about, well, we don't feel like it's worth it to give up all kinds of young talent for a guy who probably will only give us 1 or 2 good years. But there's no doubt that he would have been a win now guy. That's the type of player that would have definitely solidified the Red Sox lineup for right now and moving forward for the next year or so. But the Red Sox probably felt like moving a guy like Peyton Tolley or Connolly Early, who have a lot of potential in the Red Sox rotation in the future, was not worth it to move those types of guys. So because of all of that and what that encompasses, it came down to, okay, well, we don't want to move them, so working out a deal for Marte could get tough. But when they signed Ranger Suárez, that was a big part of this offseason too, was they were able to add a good, solid number 2 starting pitcher to throw in there behind Garrett Crochet. So by bringing in Ranger Suárez, that helps solidify the rotation. And it also makes you look back on it and wonder, would the Red Sox have been more willing to give up Early or Tolley if they knew they were going to get Suárez, or after they brought in Suárez, if they had the conversations with the Diamondbacks after that, would they have been more willing to move one of them because they secured another strong starting pitcher? Because before they acquired him, their thought process might have been, well, we kind of need these 2 pitchers because we don't have enough reliable starting pitching. But because Ranger Suárez is reliable, and if you aren't super familiar with him, he pitched in Philly last year and had a good season, but what was exceptional was his postseason numbers. He really turned it on in the playoffs, and that was something that the Red Sox said really appealed to them when they brought him in here. So the notable thing about that was, okay, we feel like he can be a strong number 2 behind Garrett Crochet. So in the grand scheme of things, could they have gotten Marte? Probably, but the timing didn't work out of when they were adamant on holding on to certain guys versus when they became more willing to move on from one of them. So that all poses a question of, where does the Red Sox infield stand now? Because Trevor Story is going to man shortstop. Willson Contreras is going to be the everyday first baseman. Now, when Triston Casas comes back, it will be interesting to see if they have Casas and Contreras platoon at first base and the other one DHs when the other one's playing first base, or do they still stick with Contreras as the everyday first baseman and Casas primarily just takes some swings at DH when he comes back? That'll be interesting to think about. Or do they have Casas start in AAA to get back into the swing of things after his injury. So there's a lot that could happen with him. But because they now have Willson Contreras to play first base, that's a sound presence there. So first base and shortstop are locked up with veterans. Trevor Story, we have to hope that he has a good season because he had a solid 2025. He has dealt with a lot of injuries in the course of his time with the Red Sox so far. But this past year was his first fully healthy season in Boston. So because his season was healthy for him, he was able to put up offensive numbers that we hadn't seen from him before in Boston, which was exciting to watch and notable. Now, thinking about all of that and what that encompasses, they need to have a strong season from Trevor Story again in order to get to where they want to be. Because the way that this offense is structured right now, it really is relying heavily on a good season from Story again, because he was what helped make that offense so competitive last year. So they really are kind of hoping to see that from him again. So with where Trevor Story is and the way that they hope that he'll perform if he's able to stay healthy, they feel confident in first base and shortstop. Now, second base and third base are where the questions come in, because I mentioned Marcelo Meyer and Caleb Durbin. Those are the options at second base and third base. Now, Caleb Durbin is a guy they just traded for this offseason from the Milwaukee Brewers, and he's a guy that they feel has a lot of upside. He had a really good rookie season last year for the Brewers, and he really made some noise in the National League, and he performed really well in the playoffs at the plate. So that's an exciting thing that the Red Sox are thinking about. And they also have Marcelo Meyer, who has just been plagued with injuries over the last few years. So the storyline with him more has to do with, can Meyer stay healthy? Because from what we've seen, he's missed quite a bit of time over the last few years due to injury. And I've spoken with him numerous times in Worcester before he got called up to the major league team. And he had talked about how he's just so ready to get called up, and he is just taking it day by day and knows his opportunity would come when it comes. And that's the attitude you kind of have to approach the situation with. And then eventually he did get called up because Alex Bregman got hurt, but then he got hurt towards the end of the season. So that's going to be something that we have to monitor, because we do need Marcelo Meyer to be healthy. And whether he plays second base or third base, that's going to be notable. To me, I think Marcelo is better suited at third. I think he plays better defense at third. He looks more confident there, and his build and structure are better for third base. Whereas Caleb Durbin is smaller. He's 5'7", and while he's played third base, I feel like he's better suited for second. So I think that's what they should do, but it seems like they're leaning more towards maybe Marcelo at second and Durbin at third. But either way, these are two players on the younger side that still need to prove themselves. So it feels like the infield situation right now is going to be one of the weaknesses. Now, what they really like about Marcelo Meyer is his defense. When he came up to the majors and was playing third base in place of Alex Bregman, defense was certainly an area in which he really impressed. And for a team that was really prioritizing a defensive heavy infield, they need to be able to be rock solid in all those positions defensively. And with Marcelo, that was certainly an area of strength for him. So thinking about all of that together, having Marcelo as a guy that can be relied on would be huge. And his offense is still up for a little bit of question because he has struggled a little bit against left-handed pitching in particular. So I'm really looking to see him continue to develop, but there's still a lot of what ifs when it comes to that Red Sox infield. And that to me is going to be something that's going to potentially hold back this Red Sox team going into 2026. But if you look at the other position groups on this team, I am feeling pretty confident about, in particular, the outfield and the starting pitching, which I feel are the Red Sox strengths going into this upcoming season, because they did work pretty tirelessly to build on the pitching depth this offseason, and the outfield was already one of the best in baseball going into this season, and they chose not to trade any of the outfielders. So coming up, I'm going to be discussing what the rest of this roster could look like. But just a reminder that I am here Monday through Thursday to talk all things Boston sports. So if you're looking to stay in the loop on everything going on with the Celtics, Patriots, Bruins, Red Sox, you name it, make sure to subscribe to Boston Balling on any podcast platform if you want to be able to tune in. I also host Locked On Red Sox for the Locked On Podcast Network. That's Monday through Friday, Red Sox Talk. So make sure you subscribe to that as well on any podcast platform if you want more daily Red Sox coverage. But you can also follow me on social media, on Twitter at Gabby Maljanian and on Instagram at Gabby_Maljanian10. You can also follow both of my shows on Twitter at LO_Red Sox and at Boston Balling. So I'm pretty accessible. So if you want to be able to take advantage and interact with me that way, be sure to follow me on social media and continue to like, follow, subscribe to the show. With spring training here, there's a lot of questions around what's the Red Sox ceiling in 2026? What type of team are they going to be fielding? And while they did make some exciting moves this offseason, they also are relying a lot on the players they have internally to take a big leap forward. And that is primarily the case on the offensive side of the ball. Lots of young talent. Some examples of this that I mean are hoping Triston Casas can come back and make some sort of an impact. Hoping guys like Wilyer Abreu, Ceddanne Rafaela, Roman Anthony, Jared Duran, Marcelo Meyer, hoping that group of players all continues to make big leaps forward in 2026. You can put Caleb Durbin into that category too, who they just got. They're hoping he makes a big impact as well throughout his time in Boston. So while they made some solid moves, I really liked the signing of Ranger Suárez. I really liked how they traded for Sonny Gray to bring him into the starting rotation, because Sonny Gray is a veteran starting pitcher who had a good season last year and has a big ability to strike people out, which is something that is huge for the Red Sox. So I really do like that they brought him in. My only concern with him is just his age. So is that going to affect his durability? Is he going to be able to be healthy? Is he going to be able to be effective? So that's a storyline that I'm looking at with Sonny Gray going into 2026. But I do like the idea of the Red Sox bringing him in as well as Ranger Suárez. So because of that, I feel like the rotation is pretty good with Garrett Crochet, Ranger Suárez, Sonny Gray, and then you look at Brayan Bello and other potential starting rotation options. So you then have all of these guys who are available to pitch in the rotation, and I think that puts the rotation in a really good spot. There are not many other pitchers better than Garrett Crochet, probably two in all of baseball. So having one of the best pitchers in the sport as your ace, it's hard to top that. So the combination of him, Ranger Suárez's postseason ability, Sonny Gray's experience and season he had last year, and Brayan Bello and the potential that he's shown, it's hard not to be excited about those four starters. Now, the fifth starting spot, I talked about a little bit of this last week on the show, could go to Johan Oviedo, who they traded for this offseason. He's a guy who they feel like has a lot of value and has a lot of potential to be a really good starting pitcher. So he could be a guy that the Red Sox maybe fill that fifth starting spot with, but there are also other guys fighting for a spot. It's less than guaranteed that Oviedo is going to take that spot. You also have Cutter Crawford, Patrick Sandoval, Connolly Early, and Peyton Tolley all in the conversation of being guys who could potentially take on that other spot in the rotation. And it's been a battle so far in camp. And because you have all these players who are in the mix, it's hard to right now say definitively who is going to take on that starting spot. We can't really say it's Oviedo's spot to lose because this is kind of an even playing field that we have going into this whole thing. So is Oviedo, to me, still going to be the choice? Yes, but at least they can see what they have on display from Cutter Crawford and company. And to me, there is a chance that maybe Cutter Crawford starts the season on the injured list because he is a step behind the other starting pitchers that are in the mix in camp right now. And to me, that means, okay, the chances of him being the fifth starter are probably unlikely. Maybe they feel like he's not going to be ready for opening day, so they have him start the season on the IL. Patrick Sandoval is on a pretty big contract, but was injured all of last year as well, so they didn't have him pitch at all in 2025. So he could be a guy who potentially gets traded still this offseason to be able to offload that salary unless they feel like they want to stick him in the bullpen. So that's another factor to think about there. And the reason why it could be beneficial for Patrick Sandoval to go into the bullpen is because the Red Sox don't really have a lot of left-handed options in the pen right now. So if they were to put Sandoval there, that could be another big factor in all of this, is that they could say, okay, that gives us another left-handed option. He's a guy who's used to starting, so he could pitch multiple innings at a time in relief, and that could be really good for us. So that could be an option there. I truly don't feel like he's going to be the fifth starter. I don't think they would have him from the get-go be starting with how much time he's missed. I think it'll be either he goes to the pen as a multi-inning relief guy, or they trade him. Then there's Connolly Early and Peyton Tolley, both of which made their major league debuts in 2025 and showed a lot of ability in different ways. Peyton Tolley needs to work on his arsenal a little bit more. Connolly Early definitely has some things logistically to work on as well. But they were rookies last year, and they just haven't had a ton of experience at the major league level yet. So those two could end up starting the season in AAA to get more reps in. To me, the ideal scenario would be Oviedo gets the fifth starting spot. Those two start the season in AAA just to be able to continue to work on things there a little bit. And then they have Cutter Crawford start the season on the injured list, and Patrick Sandoval ends up in the bullpen. To me, that would be how they would ideally structure it, but I don't work on the coaching staff or in the front office, so nobody's going to ask me. But that's just what I'm saying I think should happen. So when you think about all those options, though, the good news about that is that there's potential there. If somebody really impresses in camp, there's no reason why they wouldn't get an opportunity to pitch in the starting rotation. It's a good problem to have that you have more guys who could potentially fill that role than a lack of guys who could fill that role. Having more options of guys who could potentially fight for a spot is not a bad thing. And to me, I'm looking at it as a situation where, okay, whoever pitches the best out of camp, congratulations, you get the spot, and then they can feel better about their rotation. Whereas last year, they didn't really have as many of those options to play with, and they kind of had to just settle for what they had. So they are in a much better spot in the starting rotation now than they were last season. And to me, as long as this starting rotation stays healthy, it's no doubt one of the best in baseball. And I'm really excited to see how that plays out with this rotation. The outfield, to me, is an area of strength for this Red Sox team as well. I mean, there's no denying that Wilyer Abreu in right field, who's a two-time Gold Glover, Ceddanne Rafaela in center, who won a Gold Glove last year, and left field being split between one of the most versatile players in baseball in Jarren Duran and the overall top prospect in baseball before being called up, Roman Anthony, is not a dominant combination of players. Roman Anthony, the more that I've spoken to him, the more you realize how humble he is. He truly just takes things day by day and doesn't really carry himself like he has the potential to be one of the best players in baseball moving forward. He just is so humble about it, and he's just constantly looking for ways to get better. And that's the winning mentality. That's the type of player you want on your team long term. So I'm so glad they signed him to an extension, because he is now locked up by the Red Sox through his prime years, which I think is fantastic. And that's something I will say during Craig Breslow's tenure as a whole that he has been very good at, is he has been good at locking guys up to long-term deals. Between Brian Bayo, Ceddanne Rafaela, Garrett Crochet, and Roman Anthony, all of those guys, as of the last couple of years, have gotten locked up long-term to deals with the Red Sox. And there's a lot of doubt surrounding the Red Sox desire to pay players. And after they traded Rafael Devers, there was a lot of uproar around trading homegrown talent and not wanting to commit to anybody. But the fact that they have committed so far to a few of their young players that they see as cornerstone pieces is definitely a good sign moving forward, that if they do see somebody who is really valuable to their franchise, hopefully they'll extend them, but also keep them around, because they had extended Devers to a big contract before they traded him. So hopefully that still doesn't mean that they trade these guys eventually. But their outfield is truly going to be the heart of the team for years to come. Every player in that outfield is young right now and provides a lot of value. Jarren Duran is just a versatile player who, in terms of his wins above replacement. So essentially what that means, meaning if you take a replacement level player and stick him into Jarren Duran's role, how many more games or less games do they have on their plate with Jarren Duran versus a replacement? So, for example, are they losing more games with Jarren Duran than they would with a replacement player, or winning more games? And Jarren Duran's wins above replacement usually is about 4 or 5. So essentially that means that he's getting them 4 to 5 more wins in general than they would be getting with another player who's a replacement player. So that is all a good sign, because Jarren Duran is a valuable player in terms of all the tools that he brings to the table. And even though his offense in 2025 was a little bit of a downgrade from what we saw from him in 2024 when he had a really good season, he still was an above average hitter, and he still provided value in lots of other ways with his versatility, his speed, and his ability to play a sound defense. Now, I will say his defense in left field is not as good as it is in center, but you can't really take Ceddanne Rafaela out of center field because he's the best defensive center fielder in baseball. So you don't really have another choice. What I would be doing, though, is primarily having Roman Anthony play in left field and have Jarren Duran be the designated hitter if you want to be able to maximize those two players' talent. And Jarren Duran, to me, is somebody who needs to bat towards the top of the order because he's one of the fastest players in baseball. You want him to be able to make contact and get on base early to be able to start to rattle those opposing pitchers. So to me, maybe sticking him in the DH role primarily, because left field, he's not as confident defensively as he is in center, and center's occupied. To me, I could see that being the route that the Red Sox decide to go here. But the outfield is among the best in baseball, defensively especially, but from an offensive standpoint, Wilyer Abreu, when healthy last year, was one of the Red Sox best and most consistent hitters. Then you have Ceddanne, who no doubt best defensive center fielder in the sport, needs to work on things offensively a little bit in terms of consistency. And he took a big leap on offense in 2025 compared to 2024. I will say that not everybody gave him the credit that he deserved for it, because he definitely still had his struggles at the plate, but he cut down his strikeout rate significantly from 2024 to 2025, which is a really big sign, because that was a huge problem for him. Not exactly the most disciplined hitter, swings and misses a lot at pitches outside the zone. So because he was able to cut down on that in 2025, that's very promising that hopefully things will continue to get better for him. But even Roman Anthony, I mean, goes without saying his offensive ability. So I am excited about what Roman can do as well, and I'm excited about what the Red Sox outfield can do. Now, from a catching perspective with Carlos Narvaez and Connor Wong, this is interesting because Narvaez offensively in the first half of the season last year really impressed. And for a rookie, you don't really know what that's going to entail, but he really showed a sound offensive ability in the first half last year. The problem was that in the second half, he declined a little bit offensively, and he wasn't exactly showing that same level of value and productivity on offense in the second half as he was in the first half, so his numbers dipped a little bit. But then you think about his defense, and his defense overall was strong. He was one of the best defensive catchers in baseball last year, leading the league in caught stealing, which was great. He was able to throw that ball down to second base a lot and nail people attempting to steal a base, which was great. But on the flip side of that, he also led the league in errors as a catcher. And also he dealt with a lot of catchers' interference calls because of his placement. So those are things that he does need to work on. But overall, we saw a pretty good player in Carlos Narvaez last year. So I'm really excited to see him progress in 2026. Obviously hoping that we get the first half offensive version of him as opposed to the second half. But overall, you can't help but be excited about the future with Carlos Narvaez and hoping that he continues to make strides in the right direction. And Connor Wong struggled a lot at the plate last year. I'm hoping he can bounce back, but he is the backup catcher. So he's not going to be playing as much as Narvaez. So what's more important is Narvaez's continued development. But if Connor Wong can serve as a sound, strong backup defensive catcher, then the catching tandem will be fine. I wouldn't say they have the best catching tandem in baseball by any means, but it's serviceable. And that's kind of what you need from your catching tandem. And another player that I'm going to be looking at going into 2026 and hoping that he does something valuable is Masataka Yoshida. And he really bulked up a lot this offseason, and he has really been dedicated to continuing to improve offensively. And he was red hot in the month of September last year. No doubt about it. He was the Red Sox best hitter in the month of September and into the playoffs. The problem is that he's a one-dimensional player. He's a liability defensively. He's not the fastest guy. So the only thing he can really do is hit. And he's just not consistent enough of a hitter to be able to be considered in that upper tier of Red Sox players in terms of reliability. Because when he's on, he's really good. But the problem is he's not on enough. And there's a lot of fluctuation in terms of his game and his offensive ability. So to me, that's something that I'm going to be looking at going into 2026 is hopefully he can gain a little bit more stability and consistency at the plate. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the Red Sox are going to need that productivity from him offensively if he's going to still be on the team. And I thought the Red Sox would end up trading him this offseason. I'm sure they probably shopped him, but it's a lot harder than you think to trade him because teams are definitely not jumping up to say to the Red Sox, hey, I want Yoshida, because they're paying him a lot of money and he hasn't been overly consistent. So in order for the Red Sox to move him, it would probably take them either giving up a top 5 prospect or taking on the entirety of his salary. And I don't know that they're in a position to be willing to do that. So he might be a guy who spends a lot of time on the bench and maybe fills in at DH, but I am concerned about where he fits going into 2026 and his ability to be a consistent hitter. So am I excited about this team overall? Yes. The bullpen is another area that I'm excited about because they had one of the best bullpens in baseball last year. One thing to keep in mind is I would say Aroldis Chapman, and if he's going to be able to have a season like he had last year because he's getting older, is he going to be able to be durable, and is his season from last year going to exist again? Alex Cora feels confident that it will. So we'll have to see. But overall, I like where the bullpen's at. They definitely could use a left-handed option, like I mentioned with Patrick Sandoval going into the bullpen, because the Red Sox pen doesn't have a lot of left-handed options right now. But overall, I like where this team is at. Is it a World Series team right now? I don't feel like it is, just because of the offense. I need to see what the offense can do before I really know that. But from a pitching perspective, they will win baseball games. And I'm really excited to see how this all plays out and to see how the young players continue to improve. But thank you so much for tuning in, and continue to subscribe, like, follow, you name it. Look forward to giving you some big guests along the way as well. Thank you so much. Go Red Sox, and I'll catch you next time.